Welcome back. In this session, we're going to examine the power of secondary data. We will first begin by contrasting secondary data to the obvious, primary data. And then we'll examine the criteria for evaluating secondary data. Next, we'll look at the many different sources of internal and external secondary data, and then go on to examine syndicated data sources. Primary data is data that is gathered for the purpose at hand. On the other hand, secondary data is data that already exists. Therefore, secondary data by definition doesn't have to be collected. Therefore, can be obtained very quickly and at a relatively low cost compared to primary data. This makes secondary data a very attractive source of data. It can be gathered with minimal expenditure of money, time, or effort. As such, secondary data may be used to identify the problem, better define the problem. It may also help inform an approach to the problem, formulate a research design. It might help shed light on primary data itself, helping one to interpret the primary data more insightfully. There are, of course, certain scenarios where the researcher might feel that the secondary data alone is sufficient to answer all the questions of interest. There may then be no need at all to examine any primary data whatsoever. This is indeed the case in many situations because we can now have an abundant amount of secondary data available, and it is at a very, very granular level. Now, it's not all good. In assessing secondary data, one has to consider some of the potential problems with secondary data. These include problems of fit and problems of accuracy. Secondary data were gathered for a different purpose than primary data, and therefore the data may not be right for the job at hand. Not every single question the researcher is looking for, not every issue the researcher is looking for may be addressed by secondary data. Furthermore, secondary data may not be current. We live in a rapidly changing world. It is said that people move homes every 5 years on average. They switch cars every 5 years on average. They move homes every 7 years on average, making us a very nomadic society in the United States, especially. Furthermore, even things that you think are more concrete, like people's opinions and views. Consider, for example, this graphic that shows how fast America changes its mind. Now, granted, there are certain things that America wrangles about or has been wrangling about for years now, like guns and abortion. But aside from that, you'll notice that in certain cases when America does arrive at an agreement, for example, with regard to alcohol or prohibition. Until 1906, most states in America did not allow alcohol. But from that period until 1920, pretty much all the states got together and agreed that alcohol should be legal in America, and prohibition was dropped by 1920. So in that 14-year period, America went from, again, not allowing alcohol to making it perfectly legal. We've seen this play out in many different scenarios. Here's another example, same thing. Until 2004, gay marriage was illegal in America. From 2013 to 2016, until 2013, only a handful of states allowed gay marriage. But in the 3 years from 2013 to 2016, many other states joined the bandwagon, making it then federal law to oppose or gay marriage was basically allowed in America, made legal. We're seeing similarly rapid change in opinion and law following that opinion with regard to the use of marijuana, for example, where Most of America used to treat the use of marijuana as being illegal for the most part, punishing it, penalizing it. Social opinion on that was fairly dark, and now our view on that has changed as well. So there's the issue of currency. There's also the issue of level. Is the data gathered at the individual level, household level, or zip code level? When you're looking at a secondary data source like the US Census, for example, the US government makes available data at the block level. A block is a small part of a zip code. It may include anywhere from about 20 households to 400 households, depending on the density of population of the block. But what the US Census will share with us is the median income for that block. They won't give information for an individual. And therefore, when using such data, one has to compromise between getting individual level data and getting more aggregate level data. There's also concerns about, or another problem with it might be, whether the data was gathered on a 1 to 7 Likert type scale or as binary, as in high or low. And finally, there's always the issue of the veracity of the data. Can one trust the data? Does one know the source of the data? Was the data gathered in a biased manner? Maybe this was an organization that had a vested interest. They sought to cherry pick the data then. What is the credibility of the source of data or the data itself? These are some of the issues to consider before employing secondary data. Now, assuming all those pass muster, and after considering the benefits and the drawbacks, one has decided to use secondary data. Well, there are two kinds or categories of secondary data. One that's internal, the other that's external. Internal secondary data is one that is contained in a company's own databases and therefore considered to be internal data as opposed to external data. So think about all the data a company tracks on their customers on a regular basis. Every time you go to a store to shop for something, the store is grabbing up data or gathering data on how much you're buying, what time you're buying, and how much you paid for the items you purchased. This is called transactional data. In addition, a store like, let's say, Target, might also gather data about your demographics. They might ask you to fill out a form sharing some demographics about you in order to register for their, their special store card. They may also learn something about your psychographics, your behavioral data. If you use a login to access their website, then they have tracking data on their website, and they may also have social media tracking data on you. All this is part of a company's internal data source or data repository. Now, it may not seem like much, but even simple transactional data can tell a story about a person. Now, what you buy might tell a story a lot about you. Take, for example, the story of this one girl who was shopping at Target. So the father of this girl went over to Target and he had a question for the manager. He asked the manager the following: "My daughter got this in the mail. She's still in high school and you're sending her coupons for baby clothes and cribs. Are you trying to encourage her to get pregnant?" The manager didn't have any idea what the man was talking about. He looked at the mailer. Sure enough, it was addressed to the man's daughter and contained ads for maternity clothing, nursery furniture, and pictures of smiling babies. The manager apologized and he called a few days later to apologize again. On the phone, the father was somewhat abashed. "I had a talk with my daughter," he said. "It turns out there have been some activities in this house I haven't been fully aware of. She's due in August. I owe you an apology." Hopefully you're wondering, how in the world did Target know the girl was pregnant before her father found out? Now, if you think hard enough about this, you'll probably realize that there are a number of things she would have purchased in order that would have been signals that she's pregnant. And for the sake of the story, we're only considering the things she bought at the cash register at Target. We're not talking about a baby registry or or her online shopping behavior or what she was watching on TikTok or YouTube and so on. There's got to be a sequence of purchases she made that would then tell her. And so there's actually just some history about the story. Then Target actually was doing a lot of research on this around the early 2009-2010 period. And their whole thinking was as follows. Their thinking was that there are certain inflection points in people's lives, certain points where people's, their all their brand loyalties are up for grabs. One of those inflection points is when somebody has a baby. Other examples of this are when somebody gets married or when they move to a different city or get a new job. By inflection point, I mean a time when there's been a huge amount of change in your life. Imagine the upheaval when you move from Phoenix, Arizona to Philadelphia for a job. Think about the change in somebody's life as they travel from one country to another, or when they have a child. And now they've got to think about moving from their small apartment in East Village in New York to Long Island or someplace in New Jersey. They're not thinking about not apartment, but a house, not subway, but in a Honda Odyssey minivan. In a sense, as soon as one makes that transition, a lot of choices are being made by people. They have to think about a whole new different way of living. They've got to go from thinking about the small bodega they buy their milk from to going over to a ShopRite or a Pathmark to buy their milk from. So bottom line, Target sought to mark these time in people's lives, to target them with advertising, because that's when people are most malleable, more likely to be persuaded by a new product. So Target was trying really hard then to figure out again, what is it that we can do to kind of identify somebody as being pregnant and therefore somebody who may be changing their lifestyle quite rapidly. So in this particular story, Jenny Ward is 23 years old and so on and so forth. Now, she bought the following products. According to the model of Target, because she bought, amongst many other things, she bought cocoa butter lotion, a large purse, zinc magnesium supplements, and a bright blue rug. Put together these 4 items amongst a basket of many other items led Target's model to predict that she is very likely to be pregnant. If so, it's a great time then to target her with advertising and products for pregnant women. If you look at these, some of these might be obvious to you. Zinc magnesium supplements, supplements for use by pregnant women, a large purse to double as a diaper bag, cocoa butter lotion for stretch marks, a bright blue rug is probably a boy. You could throw in other things also here that might be markers of pregnancy, like for example, a pregnancy test. And not just one, because if somebody got just one pregnancy test, they're probably not pregnant. It is only when they get the second or third one that you know that they're guaranteed to be pregnant. So a nuance like that would be then would inform the model or the store about somebody's pregnancy status. Long story short, transactional data in itself can be a pretty powerful predictor of people. You can know a lot about somebody merely from looking through all of the transactions. So that's one example of internal secondary data. Other examples include things that many other stores might have access to. For example, think about sports stadiums. Think about, for instance, the Oakland A's and the famous story of Moneyball. Every time a player is batting, you have data about, again, how many outs they have and so on. This data can be used by the company or the sporting team to make investments of which player to bet on, which not to bet on. The Oakland A's very smartly made some really good trades, which vaulted them from having a losing season to making the playoffs. And that was what the movie Moneyball was all about. In a conversation I had with the then VP at the Mets, I asked him about if he had a Moneyball story for me, given that he's also involved with a baseball team. And he said, well, of course they do. Everybody does. In fact, they model everything. They test out every single thing to see what is going to make them have a better shot at winning a game. One thing that matters for the Mets is how tall they cut the grass. He wouldn't tell me what the magic number is for the height of the grass, though. Bottom line here, whether it's a soccer team, a basketball team, a baseball team, or a logistics company, every one of them is able to gather a very large amount of data and learn a lot about their customers from doing just that. This is all internal secondary data. In a separate video, I'll share with you how a company can learn more about traffic on their website by linking their website to Google Analytics. And I'll continue on to external secondary data in a second video.